the old perimeter is gone and people are working from anywhere. And I think there's more understanding even at the board level and the CEO level that identity is critical. They can actually understand it. I think more than they understand some other areas of security. They get it. I think that's one of the advantages and also disadvantages of identity. It meets the end user more than any other category of security. Like every employee, the CEO logs in and has to do like multi-factor authentication and all these things. Like they actually see them, as opposed to some of the stuff that like other categories where it's much more behind the scenes. So they understand the importance, and they're willing to put more budgets on it. I hear from a lot of companies that identity is now like the number one priority or the number one budget item, which is great, because I do believe, and I'm biased, but I honestly do believe that it is the most important element of security these days.
This is Identity at the Center. If it has anything to do with IAM, this is the go-to podcast. Now your hosts, Jim McDonald and Jeff Stedman.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Not so bad. Yourself?
Good. What do you think of the get up today?
I'm waiting for the magic tricks to start. Oh, like, is there a dove going to fly out of your...
Why not? I don't have the magician jacket. I've got everything else.
Yeah.
I don't have the hat either, but I've got a cowboy hat because we're in Texas.
Yeah, we're at the Gartner IAM Summit here in Texas. The other thing is, out of a magician, maybe dealer at like a casino table.
Yeah.
Another option.
In like 1876 or something like that.
That's right. You've seen the movie Tombstone. You're sitting there and Wyatt Earp walks in and takes control of things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, I've been watching the series Deadwood again, which I remember the first time I watched it, like thinking, oh my God, that's so violent. And this was TV from 20 years ago. And now
Game of Thrones had not yet aired at that point.
Yeah, no, we've been hardened.
Mm-hmm. Well, you look like you belong in the Deadwood sort of environment, right? You got the beard, you got the long hair. I could see you absolutely with a cowboy hat. You pull that off for sure.
All right. I'm going to wear one tomorrow. So we'll be set for that. That'll be our first episode of the year. This is going to be our last episode of the year.
Last episode of 2024. And it's been a ride. Another big year for us. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of things. We're going to talk about a bunch of different things today. But yeah, this is it for us. And we're going to take a couple weeks off. And then, come back, I think, first or second week of January. I can't remember what the schedule is.
Makes sense. One last conference, one last episode. So I think we should jump into it. What do you think?
Yeah. So I mentioned we're at the Gartner IAM Summit, and definitely want to give a shout out to RSM. They're the ones who are helping make this possible. Also a shout out to Silverfort. We are in their suite right now. Sweet. And we're sitting here with Hed Kovetz. He's the CEO and co-founder of Silverfort. Welcome back to the show, Hed.
Thank you. Great to be here, and really an honor to be here for the last episode of the year.
Just of the year. We're going to keep going into next year.
Thank you for inviting me.
We actually met the first time at a Gartner a couple times ago. So it would have been Gartner, I think, at the end of 2022. We did episode 166. We talked with you and learned more about identity threat detection response, IDTR. We're definitely going to get into probably some of that and then more today, but definitely encourage people to go back and check out episode 166. We're not going to make you relive your, tell us how you got to identity story. People go back and listen to that. But Why don't we start with, hey, what's new? Like, Silverfort has been in the news, a couple times over the last year and a half or so, 2 years almost. What's new with Silverfort? What's been going on in your world?
Yeah, there's been a lot going on. I mean, we're lucky to really see huge growth in this time. So, and a lot of exciting things. So we just announced a couple of weeks ago that we acquired a company for the first time, which for me personally and for the company is a big step. So we acquired a company called Resonate that is focused on cloud identity security. Great company, great people. And now, we're really kind of integrating the platforms together. So that was some recent, really exciting news. Earlier in the year, we announced a big funding round. So we raised a Series D round of $116 million.
That's it?
So, that's... we had to figure out now, what do we do with all this money? Right? We need to build a big company, I guess.
You need a podcast.
It's exciting. So a lot of things going on. And then just today, we announced a new product that we released around privileged access security. So really a new way to secure how privileged access kind of is protected across all the different environments. So there's a lot going on. Yeah,
it sounds like it, and there's a lot of money pouring into this space.
Yeah.
So I'm curious because you were kind of talking before we hit record. It's like, do people really care about the entrepreneurial side of identity? I'm interested in it, so I'm going to ask questions anyway. Whether or not people listening are interested, I want to get into a little bit.
Sure.
Having founded and run this business, and now you've made an acquisition with Resonate, I guess, what is it like to start something up like that? And second follow-up question is, there's a lot of money being raised. Yourself, one of them. What are VCs looking for when it comes to products in this space? Because it seems like identity is so hot right now.
Right. It's become really perspective. Yeah. So first of all, it wasn't always hot. I have to say, I probably had a different experience than what entrepreneurs that start today probably see. And that was harder, but I guess I'm also thankful for how it helped us mature. When we started 8 years ago, it was a pretty tough experience. I mean, we went to a lot of VCs to talk about what we want to do. We want to, do something in identity security. We had a couple of ideas. And the reaction we got from almost every VC was that's just not an interesting category. Identity? What do you mean, like authentication? That's like, isn't that like 20 years ago? That was already done. Companies, already have that. And we were trying to explain that, they did that, but then look at how many attacks are still using compromised identities. I mean, it's only growing. So something must be missing, right? And we want to solve that. Luckily, we were able to find someone who actually believed in that, but it wasn't easy. And if you want to know a bit about the entrepreneurial experience, that's like a really tough part of it. Like hearing no so many times and having people doubt what you do and is it even worth your time and obviously their money. It's tough. And one of the biggest tests, I think, is you have to get up after every time that someone tells you it's not a good idea, it's not going to work, and you need to somehow get yourself back to optimism, because that's kind of the key to building a startup. You need to be optimistic and you need to get back on your feet every time. And luckily we did. We, got up enough times to the point where now it's happening and it's growing and it's doing really well. But I don't forget that beginning. It was a much different time. Now it is getting very hard though. So I'm glad. I think it's the right thing.
I think when you walk around the exhibitor hall at this conference, I'm blown away by how many startups there are side by side with the big players in the space. What was your impression?
Yeah, there are a lot of startups. I think it's a very good thing. Because innovation will mostly come from the startups. I mean, you hear about some of the big vendors trying to do new things. It can happen to a degree, but I think that just like in any other category, the real disruptive things will come from startups. They just have a better ability to take a risk. I used to work in a big company. I'm sure many people know that, even if you come up with new ideas, the ability of a large company to just throw away everything they've done and go for this whole new approach, it's hard. They need to meet the quarterly goals and it's just harder to do. When you start a company, you could take a huge risk. And, I remember we thought, hey, either this will work and we'll have something amazing or it will not. And, let's fail fast, and figure that it's not the right thing and go do another thing. That's a risk that you can only take as a startup. So a lot of startups are now kind of paving the road in many areas of identity security, which is great. I mean, we are kind of lucky to be in that sweet spot, I feel, between being still a startup that can move fast and innovate and build, but also we're big enough at this point that we can really, execute, and we have a big customer base, and we're trying to enjoy both worlds for as long as we can before we become a big corporate. And I think at least right now, it feels like it is in that sweet spot.
How do you defend against that position of, okay, that spirit of innovation and entrepreneurialism versus big company and very slow to react. And I got to imagine that would probably keep you up at night.
Yeah, it's one of the things that scared me the most to lose that innovation. So we invest in it a lot. I think that especially this year, I think everything that is happening in the space, all these new startups that have these really cool new technologies, were kind of a wake-up call for us. We need to be ahead of the market, not only because we are getting the all the traction in the big customers, but also in innovation. So this year we've actually innovated more than ever before, more than in the early years even. And we built, it requires some organizational adjustments, right? So we built a really good innovation team, and we divided our R&D into smaller teams that each focus on a different product. So there's a team building ITDR, there's a team building privileged access security, there's a team building non-human identity security, ISPM, MFA, all these different things now have smaller teams that can operate more like a startup. Because what happens in a big or even medium-sized companies, you get this huge R&D organization at some point, and every person does a tiny piece of it. So they lose some of the motivation and definitely the innovation. By dividing it and keeping small teams that act more like startups, and if you manage to build the platform as a true platform, kind of shared infrastructure that all these products can operate on, but they don't need to worry about it, like a lot of the enterprise features. You need to be with security and compliance and scale, all these things. If you manage to push them down to a certain platform and build all these products on top, you can still keep those as almost like small startups. And we've managed to do it this year, which was a big organizational effort, but I think it was worth it, and now we're moving very fast. And still, I see startups that are doing really cool things, and I think it's great. I think we've been enough time in this market to know by now that it's not a bad thing. I think that it was much worse being back then at the time when nobody thought it's even interesting, right? So I actually prefer to have a lot of startups kind of pushing us to innovate, pushing us forward, pushing the industry forward over, if you look 5 years ago that, nobody thought it's even that interesting.
You mentioned identity security a few times, and as I walk the vendor hall, it's like, identity security. And it's like, hey, I know that company. They have been doing the same thing for 5 years, but now they're calling it identity security. Is that's just what happens, just like zero trust? Everybody's now zero trust, and then that's not popular anymore. Now it's identity security. I think identity security has a real meaning, right? So in your mind, what is that real meaning?
I think that identity security is one of the best things that can happen to this industry, is that platformization, let's call it. Because if you think about the history of identity security, for many years, it was just a feature of the identity infrastructure. We talk about IAM, right? A lot. IAM, which to me is the identity infrastructure, it manages your identities, and it's not really a security offering. To me, it's more like, it's related to productivity, to IT. Security was always a feature in that. So if you had like Active Directory or Okta or Entra, you might have some security features in there. I think that what's happening now is finally these security features are decoupling from the infrastructure to become their own standalone layer that can operate on top of all of these identity infrastructure solutions. And that's really important, because as long as they are features, they only see their own island. So if you think about it, I can log into Okta and I failed the authentication. It's not me, right? I failed the MFA. I can still then go and log into Entra or to the on-prem AD, and nobody will stop it, because those solutions don't even talk to each other. It's all islands that are looking at security as a silo. And I think that only by decoupling security from it and creating a layer that understands the whole picture, all these silos, all these islands, you can really do security effectively. If you think about it, it already happened in other categories of security. Think about the cloud security. In the early days, you were buying cloud security from AWS and Azure and Google. And after a while, people understood it doesn't make sense. You need it to operate on all the clouds. So then companies like Wiz came and created a cloud security platform. You don't buy it anymore from the cloud providers. Same for endpoint, right? You don't buy endpoint security from Lenovo and Apple and Dell. You buy it from a company that can work on all the endpoints, all the types of endpoints. I think the same is finally now happening to identity. And that is, to me, identity security. It's a standalone layer that can operate on top of all the islands of identity infrastructure. And that's the only way that we can ever, I think, make this effective and really be ahead of the attackers. And it just took longer in identity. But I think it's finally happening, which is really exciting.
Is identity a platform in your mind, or is it a component of something else?
Identity security, or in general identity?
Identity.
I think it's absolutely a platform. I think that identity is one of the biggest elements of security and also IT. I think that in many ways, identity is becoming the most important element. If you think about it now that everybody is working from anywhere and they use devices that are not necessarily the company's device, I mean, if I can log in from a cafe in Thailand using my device, and as long as I prove who I am, I'm part of your organization, your virtual network, it means that identity is pretty much the only remaining line of defense. So I think that identity is becoming, I mean, at the center, right? As you guys
That's a little bit of a leading question.
Yeah.
Because you did a webinar recently with Jim around that idea of identity being at the cybersecurity.
Oh, it's very true. I think that it's becoming the biggest piece, really, and I think that people finally recognize it.
So what is the difference between IAM and identity security?
So IAM to me is the infrastructure. It's managing the identities. Like when you start in a company, they need to create an identity for you, and it's almost like an IT or an HR feature. I mean, it doesn't mean necessarily security. There's a different question of how do you secure that identity? How do you prevent someone from stealing it? But the identity itself is not a security element. It's just, it's just like saying that your device or the data or the cloud are security. No, they're pieces of the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that you have. And then there's a question of how do you secure it? So I think that the IAM, the infrastructure, is something that includes single sign-on, and includes like onboarding and offboarding of employees. It includes what do people have permissions to access. I think it also includes passwordless authentication, which many people view as a security feature. I don't think so. I think that, obviously passwordless involves authenticating with some second factor. That's security, yes. But removing the first factor, that alone is not a security functionality. It's actually a user experience functionality. So I think a lot of these things are, to me, part of the identity infrastructure. That's what companies like Okta and Ping and Microsoft are doing. Now, security, again, was always mixed up with that. So it's almost hard to separate at this point. But I think that we can have, a discussion around what is not really part of that. What should be a security functionality that sits on top. Some things are obvious, like ITDR, right? Or I think privilege access security is part of it. Non-human identity security, which is now a very hot category, stuff like that. But there's also questions around areas that might need to almost like kind of split. IGA, for example, is that an infrastructure feature? Because some of it is, right? Like onboarding and offboarding users, things like that. Or is it a security feature? Because achieving least privilege, for example, making sure people don't have too much access, that's a security goal. So I think
there's also the compliance aspect too. Access reviews. And that's really where the IGA field started was, we got tired of sending spreadsheets around. Right? And so the idea was to, how do we comply with our SOX or HIPAA or other things like that too?
Yeah. But I think that the whole market will need to go through this evolution now, because the only way to do security effectively is if you separate it from the infrastructure. Because the infrastructure, people have a few different solutions. They have Active Directory on-prem, they have Okta in the cloud, they have maybe some SaaS applications that manage identities over there, you have the cloud infrastructure. Some people have more than that because they acquired a company and that company is using Ping. So now they have that too. if all those islands will have their own local security, again, it would be as if we would have different endpoint security for every type of laptop. Doesn't make any sense. So we have to separate security. And that is, to me, identity security. It's that layer on top that does the security that requires the overall context, like understanding all the identities and all the access, and then not only understanding it, but also enforcing security policies. I think that has to separate. And that is identity security. I'm actually very glad that more people are using that term. I agree with you. Like, I walked around the conference, so many people are saying it. Gartner is finally saying it, which they told me for years that they don't agree that there's such a thing. Now they're saying it. Some of the analysts told me, yeah, we understand that like this is happening. And I told them, great. I think that
people have spoken.
Yeah, which is very good. And it took a while, but I think it's very important, not just for us as a company. I honestly believe it's important for the industry if we want to stay ahead of the threats. It's not going to be possible to handle the evolving threats, and they are evolving fast. And this is even before AI fully kicked in. We will not have a chance if we don't really start treating identity security as an overall thing and not as a local feature.
Yeah. So you presented this morning at the summit. I think one of the main themes that you talked about was this idea of legacy IT and modern IT coexisting. I mean, I have a friend who made the observation, the modern CIO has one foot in the past and one foot in the future. So the thinking is like, okay, well, from an identity security standpoint, what do they need to secure, the past or the future? Obviously, they need to secure both. Yeah. So given that context, you've got to secure both. How do you do that from an identity standpoint? You think about the legacy platforms, they were built to secure the on-prem network. When I say legacy, it's not just mainframes, but it's could be modern applications or running in an on-prem environment. Now you have applications that you're hosting in platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, as well as, SaaS applications. The deployment models are evolving. So you have all these things going on. Yeah. How do you secure it all? How does a modern CISO or CIO look at this problem?
Yeah, it's a big problem, honestly. And it's getting even more complex when you think not just about applications, but think that companies have databases and servers and file systems and OT environments, right? There's all these other things that are not even web applications. And they use all kinds of protocols to authenticate to. I think that we have to solve both because attackers are looking at this as one attack surface. I mean, we think, okay, we'll protect these applications and not these, so we are half protected. No, you're zero protected because an attacker can choose where to log into. So, we've seen a lot of attacks where an attacker compromised the weakest link, which is often the legacy, the on-prem, by just taking advantage of how vulnerable Active Directory is and, getting user credentials over there with brute forcing them or Kerberoasting or all kinds of things. Now, once you do that, because most organizations sync their password between AD to the cloud, you actually have the cloud password now because it's the same password. So we think about those as two different islands, but, if I compromise one of them, I compromise the other. And that's something that I think people understand more and more now. It's even more complex than that because even if you secured some of the ways to authenticate to the legacy systems, let's say that you deploy a multi-factor authentication product on all your servers, right? And it protects the Windows login screen because that's what these agents often do. You install, don't want to name the vendors, right? But think about all the common MFA vendors. And now everyone logging into that server is getting MFA on the login screen instead of just a password. But as an attacker, I can choose a different way to log in. I can log in with remote PowerShell. I can log into a shared folder on that server. I can log in with so many other tools that it's a joke. It's like you lock the front door, but the window is open. And I think that people understand more and more now that if you don't secure identities everywhere and all of the access, it's meaningless because the attacker get to choose how they log into your system.
And they're not going after the front door.
They're not. They prefer the command line tools, right?
Yeah.
We spoke to a company that got breached, and they were using one of the top, MFA and PAM solutions. And they deployed it everywhere. It was on all the servers, all the accounts. Then the attacker just went in and he was using one of these alternative interfaces which attackers use anyway. And every ransomware is using anyway. I don't even think that's the sad part. I don't even think the attacker knew that there was an MFA solution in place. It's not that they knew it and tried to avoid it. They just didn't even know because the way they log in, the way ransomware spreads in the network is with CLI. Exactly. It's with command line tools anyway. So if we don't secure those things, which is probably the hardest, the fact that we have MFA on our web applications or our RDP or VPN, it's almost meaningless. And that's why we really believe that you need to cover all the darkest corners of the IAM infrastructure. And there is a way to do it. Again, maybe we'll talk, in the future. I don't want to go too deep into the technology, but there are ways to do it. It's just, it took actually investing a long time in understanding how those things even work and, why do you do it? And it's, as I said before, it's not sexy. So when we went to VCs to talk about that, say, you want to do what? You want to protect the legacy? So now, obviously, we also protect the cloud, and with the Resonate acquisition, we do even more and more there. But when we started, we only focused on those dark corners. It's not where investors want to focus, but it is where companies have a problem. Yeah,
it's interesting. Part of my thinking when I asked the question was thinking of that legacy environment. In other words, on-prem environment. Organizations have been investing in identity solutions for that environment. Cloud's obviously overwhelming, and it's been overwhelming for a long time for a lot of organizations. There are still organizations that are, kind of beginning their journey. But my wonder is, okay, so as a CISO or as a CIO, is the right approach to say, take those platforms and try to solve for my hybrid situation, or do I need different tooling?
So I think that until recently, you needed different tools. I think that what's finally happening is consolidation. We are part of it. I think other companies are trying to achieve the same, of really protecting identities end to end. I think that's how you have to do it. So on-prem and cloud, humans and machines, privileged and non-privileged. Just end to end, because if you don't look at it end to end, you're missing you're missing some of the critical areas. And then, the attackers will find the blind spot.
Well, let's expand the question. So we talked about the 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future as kind of like this major divide. And then you just referenced another major divide. And it's as hot as an identity topic could be right now, which is non-human identities. So we know how to manage human identities. We've been doing it for so long, and we've been ignoring the non-human identities. I'm part of that. I'm guilty too. It's not that we didn't know it was important. It's that we didn't have the tools.
Yeah, and I think it is one of the biggest problems. So I think it makes sense that a lot of companies are trying to focus on it now. I agree that the main issue is that people didn't think it's possible to protect them for a long time. Even if you think about the older types, like service accounts in Active Directory, they've been around for decades, right? But people didn't think there was an effective way to secure them. I think most organizations will try to do that with PAM tools. And with PAM tools, you have to change the password. That's kind of how PAM works, which I think is a pretty old approach, but that's what we had for the last decades. And when you change a password on a non-human identity, it breaks things. In many cases, it breaks applications because they have them, they have hard-coded somewhere in the script or somewhere in the application towards the password. So I think people got scared of doing it. Like they tried. I spoke to a CISO, tried to do it once with these type of tools and took down a whole data center. And then he stopped.
That's a very real fear. I mean, a lot of organizations struggle with that fear of what if?
Yeah.
What if I change that password? What if I shut down that account?
Yeah.
They know it exists, and yet they still let it sit there.
Yeah. And when we came out with our solution to protect service accounts, I think it was 3-4 years ago, we thought it's just a small thing. Like we thought one customer suggested, hey, if you can do this for humans, why don't you do the same for non-humans? And we did, and we thought it's going to be a feature. We didn't even charge money for it in the beginning. And it became one of our best products because it is a huge problem and it takes a different approach. You can't just try to use the tools that use for human identities on it. I think that the best approach with non-human identities is obviously visibility is a big part of it. You need to discover them, see what they're doing, who owns them, where they're being used. That's a huge part of it. People don't even know.
Yeah, kind of the governance of it.
Yeah, they don't even know, and they don't even know that some of them are being abused for completely different reasons. Like, somebody created a service account once, and now they're just using it for 10 different applications.
That never happens. Nobody does that.
Or people use their personal account to run application instead of asking for a service account. It happens a lot. I think I told that story in the past. I don't remember when. Where we had a customer that we were installing our product for, and we need a service account, just like a regular domain user service account in order to run our product. And we said, hey, can you go create a service account for us? And he just said, no, just let's use my own account. It's like, that's what you invited us to fix. Like, and it's so built into the way people work that he didn't even realize that he's offering this to the vendor that came here to fix this problem.
Yeah.
So people do it all the time. So visibility is a big part of it, and finding all these bad, behaviors. But then the second part is, how do you secure them? So rotating passwords is sometimes the right answer. Usually it's not. So you need to figure out, how do you basically prevent any use of this identity outside of what it needs to do. So if you built a non-human identity that only needs to connect from A to B every 2 hours, let's somehow lock it down to only be able to do that. So if somebody will try to use it anywhere else, it should be unusable, and it should trigger an alert.
A very narrowly defined scope.
Yeah.
And that is all it can do. Yeah.
I agree with that.
But that's difficult to do sometimes when, I'm going to play the advocate for the customer, and someone on the security side is, I've asked security vendors, a lot of times they'll say, oh, we need a domain admin account, and they just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, you push back on that and you say, okay, well, what do you really need?
Yeah.
And being able to have that conversation in a way to say, okay, well, you don't really do domain admin. What you need are these 3 permissions. And a lot of security vendors take the easy way out and just give it.
Yes, I agree. And not only security vendors, the things security vendors are actually more aware of it than some other IT vendors that just ask for it no matter what. I think that part of it is also look at all the identities you have today, look at what permissions they have, and look at what are they actually doing. And let's correlate that. Let's correlate that continuously to see that, this account has the permissions to do X things, but is only doing a small portion of that. And over time, let's automatically recommend to reduce what they can do. So it's, it's just in time access, but it's also just enough access that we need to achieve. All of these things, I don't think are new to people. Like the fact that you should do it, I think that they just didn't know that it's possible. And I think that vendors kind of stayed in their comfort zone for a very long time, kind of doing the same thing. And now finally, there's almost like a renaissance in identity security. But think about it, for how long did we just have the same approach, the same technologies, while other categories of security got to have such amazing innovation, and I envied that. Like, I looked at some other categories of security where there was so many new things going on. And in identity, it seemed like nobody wants to do anything differently than how they did it for the last decades. Now there finally is willingness to do it, and the technology is there. I mean, the technology is possible. I mean, if people are willing to consider doing things in a better way, the technology is there. I think it's evolving very fast now.
Yeah, you said something scary, and I think this is part of the inertia, which was, okay, the existing tools can't do what we need them to do for non-humans. Layer on top of that, they're probably more complex to manage than people. you mentioned governance, then you also have secrets management, authentication, monitoring. So layer all that on, you've got your IGA, PAM, single sign-on. So you have all these features on top of the fact that it's not solved. So now it's a more complex population. And I think you said in your talk, another thing that I agree to, which is that the non-human identities need to be tied off to people. So, right, that's part of that governance solution. So now you can't use your existing tools, or your existing tools can't do the job. And you need to solve multiple tiers of functionality in order to really get your arms around this population. It's not an overnight solution. It's not going to be solved by, waving a magic wand.
It's very hard. I have to say, like, as someone who's I feel like we're innovating in this space, and we have like a lot of things that we're doing, I think, in a better way than before. It's complex. Like the whole mission of securing identities, I think one of the most complex in cybersecurity in general. Like, I have obviously a lot of friends that run companies in other areas of cybersecurity. I think that identity is one of the most complex. I think that the fact that there's so many solutions already doesn't help, because the fact that you already have 20 different solutions, I mean, it makes it even more difficult, because we're not just coming in with this amazing new platform and you have nothing today and we just come and install it for you and you're done. You also have like 20 different things that you already have in place that we need to deal with and integrate with and work with. It makes it a little more complex, but I think that that's part of the mission. Like, how do we work with the existing stack while it's gradually being replaced? Because it will be. Like, a lot of these old pieces, they're there for now. Over time, there will be next-gen solutions for all of them. I mean, a lot of startups are already doing amazing things, and I think the technology is there. Companies need to be open to looking at new ways of doing things, better ways of doing things. And I think that they finally are. At least that's what I'm feeling from talking to a lot of even the largest companies. I mean, we all already work with like a lot of the Fortune 50 even. So even the largest companies that were always like a little slow are opening up to the idea that, hey, we can't do this with the old tools. So what's new? What's out there? I think we can see that in the conference a lot. Like even the companies that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I remember talking to them and they said, sorry, we're like, it may be a better way, but we're kind of stuck with how we do things. Now they're coming back and saying, okay, like we understand this is evolving and we need to catch up.
What do you attribute that to? Because I think there's this real, fatigue that comes with, I need another tool to do this thing, right? Why can't X do this thing that I already have in place? What do you think has changed over the last year or so where those companies have started to make those investments? Because these things cost money.
I think that one thing is that the new generation of technologies matured a little. I mean, when we started, even last time we spoke a couple of years ago, we were still growing. We had some big enterprise customers, but it was kind of early. A lot of the customers that started working with us in the early days took a bet on us. I think that now that it's much more established and we have like 1,000 enterprise customers using this. So it's a little less of a risk for them and they don't like risk, right? At least many of them. So I think that's one thing. Second thing is the fact that the threats are evolving. I think people understand that they're going to get breached a lot if they don't figure out what to do. So I think that's partly part of it. And again, there's the overall priority that identity is getting over other categories of security because the old perimeter is gone and people are working from anywhere. And I think there's more understanding even at the board level and the CEO level that identity is critical. They can actually understand it. I think more than they understand some other areas of security. They get it. Like I think that's one of the advantages and also disadvantages of identity. It meets the end user more than any other category of security. Like every employee, the CEO logs in and has to do like multi-factor authentication and all these things. Like they actually see them as opposed to some of the stuff that like other categories where it's much more behind the scenes. So they understand the importance and they're willing to put more budgets on it. I hear from a lot of companies that identity is now like the number one priority or the number one budget item, which is great. because I do believe, and I'm biased, but I honestly do believe that it is the most important element of security these days.
So this idea of identity being the new perimeter, I struggle with that because it's not the new perimeter. It's been around for 15, 20 years at this point. You know, there's this idea. It just doesn't make sense to me. I want to do a little bit of a lightning round here because you've been very generous with your time. I want to get you back out onto the conference.
Okay, sure.
Let's do a quick round. Let's start with shared signals and shared signals framework. I think this is an area that's showing a lot of promise, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are as someone who's on the vendor side of this. And this is an idea. The idea here is that products being able to talk to each other, which sounds good on paper, but probably more complex behind the scenes. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. I think that we have to start working better as an industry between all the products, because customers are not going to have one product. You know, some of the big vendors like to believe that they can just be the only cybersecurity product that the company has. I think to 99% of the companies, that's not going to work. They don't want to put all the eggs in one basket. They want some technologies that are good for each space. We all have to understand how to work together. So I think it's a great initiative, very compelling to us. And I think that it's one of the things that as our company grows, we understand more and more that are super important to our customers, because early on, we only thought about what will make our product the best and what best features we can build. The more we meet more real customers and deploy in real environments, we understand that integrating with all the other tools they have is top priority. Because otherwise, it's just another tool that you need to go to and log into, and then there's a cool UI. It's like, cool, but I'm not going to log into it because I have 100 other tools. So we have to figure out how to work together. I think, I'm really glad that these initiatives are getting traction.
Yeah, in the real world, that ends up being, let's take the logs and just stick them in our SIM.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then it just
go there to die.
Right, and it just sits around. We started this conversation 2 years ago. We started it with identity threat detection or response. Yeah. So here we are 2 years later, and it was kind of a newish term back then. Is ITDR is in identity security? Is identity security an evolution of ITDR? Was it always identity security? We're just finding better ways to talk about it. Where do you see that intersection between ITDR and this concept, maybe, of identity security?
Yeah. No, I think ITDR is one element of identity security. In our platform, it's one of 7 different products. I think it's a very important element, but at the end of the day, ITDR is only about detecting attacks that are happening right now. It's not about preventing future attacks, not about solving vulnerabilities. It's not about protecting different types of identities. It's only about telling you that you're under attack right now. So it's one element. I think that ITDR did do something important. I think it was one of the first subcategories of identity security that got everybody to agree that there needs to be identity security category.
Do you see it as like the killer app for identity security? Is it the thing that put it on the map?
I think that this, together with maybe NHI security now, non-human identities, I think were both played a very important role. Although there are 2 very specific elements of identity security, I think what was good about them is I think people agreed that those should be kind of decoupled from the infrastructure. Because think about ITDR. Does it make sense to do ITDR only within one IAM solution without understanding what behaviors are happening in the other? Obviously not. And I think it was so obvious that it got people to generally accept the idea that identity security has to be a layer on top. So even though ITDR or NHI are not the only pieces, I think the fact that they got traction in the last couple of years did a lot of good service to this market. ITDR, I think, is gradually becoming a feature in bigger identity security platforms, and that's what I think it should be. So it served a very important role. It still serves as a very important functionality within an identity security platform, but I don't see it as a standalone category. I don't think many companies will buy an ITDR product these days. I think they will look for a platform that also has ITDR in it. It's kind of like how I think UEBA evolved in the past. We thought about it as a product, and then it kind of got merged into other products, and it became almost like a must-have feature in other products. I think ITDR is that same thing in identity, but still a very important functionality.
So when this episode airs, it's going to be 2 weeks from 2025, which blows my mind. So little bit of, let's think about the future. What's the future for identity security?
No project.
Yeah, no, I think about it a lot. It's a very good question. I think that a few things that I think will happen in 2025 and beyond. One is I think that consolidation will continue. We have too many products in this market. The fact that people need 20 different products to do identity security is a problem. Most companies can't afford it and can't manage it. So consolidation will continue through acquisitions, through companies building more and more products. I think there are a lot of companies that you used to think about as a PAM company or an MFA company or ITDR company. Now you go to the website and you see identity security. It's a bigger story now. I think it's a good thing. Second is I think that AI will start to have much bigger impact in a few different ways. I think that one is obviously attackers will start using it more. We already hear about more attacks where somebody's using like deep fake to trick someone into thinking that they're the boss or someone from IT and get them to give them the credentials or prove the MFA. It's very concerning. There's also opportunity to use AI to our benefit. But I think even more interestingly, there's a question of how do we secure the identities of AI agents? Because AI agents are a new type of, let's call it non-human identity that is very different from what we used to call non-human identity. So this category of NHI was barely even born and now it has to reinvent itself. It's funny. But I think that will be a big task that, as an industry, I think is actually very exciting because we get to play a big role in what will the future of AI look like in order to make it secure, which I think is a part of a bigger thing. I mean, the last couple of years, we've all been excited about Gen AI. I think now as it matures, there's a whole ecosystem that develops around like the infrastructure for Gen AI. How do you secure it? How do you do compliance for it? How do you, like companies that are not building the actual AI, but they're building all the ways that organizations will be able to use it safely and effectively. So I think that the identity industry actually have a huge opportunity to be part of it, to create something that will enable organizations to use AI better by securing the identity and the access that AI agents are doing within the environment. So that's a pretty exciting thing.
Yeah. I think about is it more risky to use AI or is it more risky to not use AI?
In my opinion, it's more risky to not use AI these days. I mean, that's my view as a CEO, not even as a security vendor. I have part of my job is as someone who leads a security company, I need to think about obviously how do we help secure AI, and there's a lot of risk, a lot of questions there. On the other hand, as a CEO of any company, I think that you cannot afford to not adopt AI fully. I'm not just saying try and test it. I think that any CEO who is not jumping in to adopt AI as much as they can, I don't think will be able to exist in a few years, because the effect that this has on productivity is so big. I don't even know if all companies understand it. I think some companies obviously do, and you see what they're doing. We're adopting it a lot internally. Like so many things that we are now starting to do with AI, and we are only scratching the surface. So I think that it will be almost not competitive to not adopt AI to its full potential. And now as security vendors, we have a job at how do we help organizations do it securely. But I think that we have to run very fast because nobody's going to wait for us. Like the impact on the business is so big if you adopt AI well, that people are going to do it whether it's secure or not. So we just need to make sure that we help them do it securely. I don't think they'll be able to afford to not do it.
Yeah, I think that if data is your crown jewel and you have competitors, if you use AI, there's the risk of we have to open it up to our data, to our crown jewels. If they get stolen, that could ruin our business. But if we don't use AI to get the most out of that data, and our competitors do, and there's not a breach, they're going to smoke us.
Yeah, we'll be very secure losers.
It's very secure losers, right?
It sounds very much like the cloud conversation from 20
Yeah, maybe.
Well, although the cloud because someone else is going to have it now.
Yeah, although I think that this is much bigger than the cloud revolution. I think this is going to be huge, and I don't need to, I'm sure enough words have been said about this. But I believe in it. I've seen already, and also talking to other CEOs of other companies, not even in cybersecurity, just in general, I'm already seeing the impact, and we are only starting. This is only the beginning. So it's hard to even understand how much this is going to change everything. And I think that we have a chance as a security industry, and I think especially as identity, in the identity security industry, to have play a role in how can we make it secure. I think it is possible. I think there is a way to make AI secure, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm talking to other vendors and customers about. And I think there's so much we can innovate and do in this space. So that's one thing that I don't think we'll fully get to its full potential in 2025, but it will definitely make a big step.
Yeah. So here's my prediction for next year, 2025. I don't know if I'll go to RSA, probably not, but I'm going to guess. I'm going to walk through the vendor halls and see a whole new cottage crop of AI security units, right? It's, it's out there, it's going to happen, and it's going to be, that'll be the RSA, the conference trend for next year, and maybe the year after that, right? Just like we saw with Zero Trust and AI, right?
Half of them will be called something AI.
Right, yeah.
Because you don't want to miss the fact that they're AI companies, so it's important to put it in the name. If you look at how investors now choose where to invest, I think that it's very hard for any investor these days to even justify investment in a company that is not about AI. Even to their investors, to their LPs. Because it's such a game changer. Everybody wants to be part of it. They don't know even where to put the money.
Just put it everywhere.
Yeah, so that's the strategy right now. Let's just put it everywhere. But I think that it is becoming more difficult if you're a startup, early stage startup, not in AI. I'm happy that we started back when not being an AI company was okay. And now because our business is big, we get to raise money based on our performance and not just based on an idea. Because I think these days raising money for an idea that is not related to AI is actually pretty hard. The investors are very biased, and I don't think it's just another trend that will be replaced in a year. I think it's going to be with us for the next, long time.
Oh, so AI is not going away. Okay, interesting. No, that's a bold statement.
No, I don't know. I mean that the fact that investors almost solely want to invest in it, I think is going to change the way it's, for a long time, the way that startups even come up with what idea they're going to go after, which is pretty crazy. I think it's going to be an interesting year in general for, all technology, but also in identity. There's so much going on, and I think that with the momentum that is now kind of coming to identity security, I think it's really the most exciting time that we have since we started at least 8 years ago to be in this market. It's what we've been waiting for years, honestly.
It's an exciting spot. I am very bullish on AI. We've joked about turning this into the AI Center podcast. I want to get you back out there, but we always end on a lighter note. And we're hitting, before we record, I said, hey, what kind of hobbies do you have? You said, well, I used to have hobbies. And you mentioned things like being an artist and being a bartender. And I used to be a bartender as well. We started talking about that.
That's awesome.
Tell me give me your craziest or wildest bar story, because I feel like we all have something like that.
Oh yeah, there's too many. Yeah, it's it's been for me not even before I joined the security industry. It was kind of in the middle, because I was in 8200. It's like a technology unit for doing cyber offense. And then when I left the military, that's where I did this. So I was I was doing it almost as a break. I didn't want to jump right straight into to technology again. And I just worked as a bartender, and it was pretty insane. I had a couple of years where I only worked there, and it was honestly amazing. Like I used to meet so many amazing people and have like crazy stories, and then wake up at noon, and it was a very different life.
I feel like you're dodging the question a little bit.
Yeah.
Give me a story.
No, it's I mean there was obviously some crazy nights, right? I think we'll leave it at that, and then ones that I don't even remember sometimes, I have to admit. But it was awesome. I'm glad that I've done it, and I think that I learned so much about like how to treat people and work with people, even more than I learned in the tech industry, that I took with me to managing a company and the sales, right? And managing people. I feel like it was such a good lesson on just how to communicate with people of all kinds and create friendships very quickly, right? Because that's what you do as a bartender. You need to talk to someone and almost immediately become their friend, right? And I think that's such a great skill that sometimes technology founders are missing, because they care so much about the technology and they're so focused on it, so passionate about it. And I am too, that they miss that element, the human element of like building a good bond with someone that at the end of the day, even in technology, is still the most important thing, because we're all people. And as much as everyone is like, can be excited about your technology, I think that as a founder, you need to also build relationship like really quickly with investors, with customers, with employees, and know how to treat them. And I think that one of the biggest advantages we have as a company in Silverfort is the people element and the culture. So that's part of it. And by the way, we just moved to a new office, like a really big office space. And one of my projects that even some of my team may find out about only in this episode is that I actually want to build a small bar in there.
There you go.
So it's a big office. We have like a big dining room, and there's this small room next to it that we didn't know what to do with. We said, hey, maybe we'll just put a few chairs there because it's like a small, tiny room. And I said, no, we're going to do a small bar in the office, and that to me will be like a real closure.
So when you build that and you get that set up, what's the first drink you make to sort of christen the opening of the bar, so to speak?
That's a good question. I change my favorite drink every few years, but right now for the last few years it's been Negroni.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I also drink whiskey a lot. There'll be something for everyone, but hopefully not as many crazy stories, hopefully in the office.
Not in the office. We got HR policies now, all that kind of stuff, right?
I hope that it will keep it lighter there. But no, you need to enjoy work a bit. I mean, I generally believe that in a startup, you need people to do amazing things, right? To go above and beyond and build innovative, amazing things. And I think people can only do that when they're happy, when they actually enjoy what they do and who they do it with. I mean, you can go and work in a company and do your job, but to really do amazing things, I think that you can't do that unless you really enjoy the people that you do it with, that you kind of want to make this happen, not just because you want to get paid, because you can get paid even if you do average work, but if you really care about the people that you do it with and you want all of it to succeed. So I really do believe that it's important to create an environment where people actually love what they do and love the people they do it with. And that's like the most important thing you can do to build a successful startup, because all the rest of it, the technology and the sales and all of that will happen if the people that work for you actually love what they do and they're happy where they are, because they are the ones who need to do it. Like I have 400 employees right now. If I close another deal or think about another feature that's almost meaningless, the people that work in the company, they are the ones who need to do all these things. And they will probably never like share how much I care about the company, but if I can get them to really feel at home in this company and to really feel like it's theirs and they care, I think that's the thing that makes startups successful. So if part of that is having the best bar in town,
Sometimes it's the little things. That's all it takes.
I was at a very large technology company recently, and they had like a Prohibition era speakeasy. And it was hidden behind a false wall. So there's a bookshelf.
I was wondering, because I know exactly what you're talking about. Because I'm not sure how to bring that up, but
you'll have to tell me more about it, because that's exactly what I want to do.
If you have enough space, I mean, what a killer idea, right?
Space.
Yeah, we'll do that off the recording.
Okay.
Sounds good. I'll invite you. Maybe the next episode we can shoot over a drink.
I'm happy to do that. I don't remember how to bartend, but I'll do my best.
It's funny that you come from that background to it. I think it's
10 years in food service.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, just kind of assume I've been in this forever. It's like, no, I had a full career, waiting table. There's nothing as stressful as a 5-table section at a Chili's on a Friday night outside of a movie theater. That's the most stressed I've ever been in any job ever, and nothing has ever come close.
I actually agree. I think that people underestimate it. I think that the amount of what you learn about about service and about sales and about people in the service and food industry is so much more. I think that it's actually a really good background. That I also have like a few employees that come from this, and I actually see this today as a huge advantage when I see it in someone's resume, which most people wouldn't think about.
I think everybody should have to serve, one way or another, that's the service. Everyone needs to understand that.
Yeah.
All right, Jim. Last statement for the year, 2024.
Let's go 2025.
Okay. We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Hed, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to get that. I'm going to put your LinkedIn back in our show notes so people can reach out, whether they have Negroni recipes or whiskey or whatever.
Anyone who wants to talk about some of these things, I'm really happy to talk. So feel free to reach out.
So that's great. We're going to go and leave it for this week and for this year, which is crazy to say. We have the YouTube channel. We're at idacpodcast.com. If you go to idacpodcast.tv, you can find our YouTube channel. So for now, we're planning to continue to do that. We'll see. But like and subscribe. That shows support for that as well. And of course, you can connect with any of us on LinkedIn as well for any thoughts, ideas, complaints, concerns, etc. We read them all. So with that, we'll go ahead and leave it. Thank you, everybody, for watching and for listening this year. And we'll talk with you all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.